Do it.
Let's see how this looks. Looks pretty good on my side, and we're live. Slide
Fantastic.
that over. What's up, man? So good to finally get to talk to you.
Yeah, great to get to talk to you as well, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I guess it's been one of the things that most excited me, like after we finished the course, and starting to see people talk online and people learning. I just wanted to like connect with as many of the Bitcoin plebs, the pleb devs that
Yeah.
I could, because I don't know, it's my people. Because it's like that's who I relate to.
Yeah. No, I mean, just from the perspective of like someone who took the course, it's like it was amazing to, I don't know, it was amazing to like be able to like still be able to, chat with you guys, whether it was through Twitter DMs or, everything else is just because it's complicated stuff, right? We could probably launch right into it, but it's
Hmm.
stuff where it's like especially if it's your first like time, your first kind of like foray into it. It's like, man, it gets a little bit intimidating pretty quickly. You know.
Exactly. And this is really part of my thesis as well, is like we because like Bitcoin is so sophisticated. Like, I don't remember who said this before, but I love this quote, is that Bitcoin is like everything you don't know about computer science combined with everything you don't know about economics.
Yeah.
So like if
Yeah.
you're gonna dive in from zero and you really like care to understand things, like you'll kind of look on the econ side and
Yep.
have to relearn everything or just like learn stuff from first principles. And then on the computer science side, it's very much the same. And so this kind of just builds up this image that like, wow, Bitcoin is this, it's this really complicated, sophisticated, I guess you would say,
Yeah.
technology that it takes a lot of time to understand it, a lot of time to be able to engage with it. And while that is true, you look over at like Ethereum land, and
Yeah.
actually they've got the real Ruth Goldberg machine over there, but
Absolutely.
they're
Yeah.
still able to get devs. They're
Yeah.
still able to
Yeah.
mint new developers and
Yeah.
bring people into their ecosystem.
Which is, I mean, that's an interesting point. Do you have any thoughts as to why, do you think it just attracts like a different kind of developer, like developers who think, I don't know, like I don't want to be like prescriptive or anything, but it seems like, at least from like a very kind of, 10,000 foot perspective, like a lot of the developers who work in ETHland like believe in themselves to be able to like manipulate the Rube Goldberg machine to benefit themselves, or maybe they're actually acting altruistically or whatever, but it seems to be different crowds maybe. But at the
Hmm.
same time, like I think, I don't know, like with stuff like the inscriptions and ordinals thing, I think we are seeing a little bit more kind of like crossover where it's like, you know, personally, like I'm not super interested in inscriptions and ordinals, but my thought there is just like, if you pay transaction fees, like I like to a certain point, I can't really like say anything else aside from like, you pay the transaction fees, it's on Bitcoin. Like I
Hmm.
guess though the question is like, is there a difference between like Bitcoin developers mentality generally speaking and like elsewhere?
Yeah, I think a Bitcoin developer that's like has experience, there
Sure.
will be a difference there, but I think that really the developers starting out, like they all want the same thing, which is
Hmm.
like opportunity, or I mean, yeah,
Sure.
basically just opportunity, growth.
Hmm.
And so I was when I was first wanting to learn how to code, um, I wanted to learn how to code because of Bitcoin. But
Right.
then
Right.
just because of like the state of Bitcoin at the time and my perspective on it, which was wrong, I thought that I needed to be building on Ethereum. I thought that that's what
Mm.
everyone was going to be building on because this was like in 2017.
Yeah.
I was new, and there was the whole narrative running around of like Ethereum is the world computer, and
Mhm.
Bitcoin is like the bank, right? It's kind
Right.
of this
Right. Right.
simple analogy that everyone was boiling down to. But really, it was also like the narrative of Ethereum. I had bought into it implicitly without
Yeah.
even realizing it, which is like, I want to. I want to build like a DAO or something. Like that was kind of
Right.
my
Right.
like weird, never gonna happen like ideal of
Yeah.
what might be possible on Ethereum. Um, and even later on after that, I got really into stacks.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and
Right.
looking
Right.
back, I realize now like I was only so into stacks because I was buying into their narrative, and
Yeah.
because they had great documentation and a good developer ecosystem, and it seemed like
Mhm.
something that I would actually be able to do.
Right.
And
It was like a
so
pro.
yeah, like all of it comes down to this barrier of entry, which is what
Mm,
finally like crystallized for me into PlebDevs was realizing that like Bitcoin and Lightning specifically, we have this
yeah.
completely unnecessary barrier to entry. And at the same time, we also seem to only focus or mostly focus on protocol versus
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
application
Yeah.
development.
Yeah.
So I guess yeah, just a lot of thoughts there, but really I think the devs they're just looking for opportunity. They're looking for some kind of future.
Yeah.
You know, you make your own bed first,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
it's a lot to ask someone to like you know just go all in and don't expect to get
Yeah.
paid on the other side, especially if you're starting from zero.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting. I think about like the focus, or it just not focus so much, but just the perception of like developer focus on protocol and Bitcoin. And I'm specifically, I think we're both talking about Bitcoin Core, where it's like, and I think the as far as like barrier to entry, like the lowest barrier to entry, uh, I see that in Lightning right now, as far as like the opportunity to create novel things that are easy for people to use, because
Hmm.
like, you know what I mean, like you hear it all the time, and it's like if you run your own Lightning node, whether it's a routing node or whether you're just like dinking around with like $10 payments and stuff, it's like, man, managing channels and like operating, like making sure your uptime is at a certain level, and you know all these kinds of considerations, it's like there's still so much room for novel products that are like really useful to be built. And you don't need to to know C++ or C sharp or whatever. Like you can, I mean, like that's kind of what attracted me. I guess we can kind of like dovetail into
Yeah.
the topics. That's what attracted me to the PlebDev course, was the fact that it was somewhat focused on like front end. You know what I mean? In the sense of like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like just basics of like front end development. Because when I was considering like learning how to code, I was like, okay, I'm not the youngest dude in the world. I'm not old, but I'm not the youngest dude in the world. I was like, I don't want to spend like, a couple years trying to like learn back end development, which in my head at the time, I was like, that's so complicated. Like there's so
Hmm.
much that goes into it. So I was like, and I had some conversations with some folks at Bitcoin Park. I had conversations with developers, and I was like, what do you guys dislike to do? Like, what do you guys not want to do in like in a project? And like almost all of them said front end. And I was like, perfect. Perfect. That's my in then. Like, cause like me as a person, it's like, if there's something that people don't want to do, like I always see that as the opportunity to like, especially if it's something I want to be a part of, that's the in.
Hmm.
So I was like, front end stuff also seemed approachable to me in the sense of like, um, I know what a website is. I like thought I knew what a website was, um, at least like a web page and stuff like that. And so that's what was like initially attractive to me about the PlebDev course, especially considering you're working on like you're working with LN bits, you're doing stuff that's like applicable to Bitcoin. Like that's what was initially interesting to me about it. And then I think we'll talk a little bit more about this too, but the way it's structured is very it's intuitive, in the
Okay,
sense of
that's
like
good.
it progresses in a way that makes sense to me now, knowing a little bit more. I don't know very much, of course, but like uh, looking back on it, it's like, okay, that makes sense, the way that you would progress there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's really cool to hear, and it's funny. Like I knew before you even said that, I knew that they're all gonna say front end,
Yeah.
and this is kind of like a lot of the classic developer personality type, I guess.
Yeah.
Like a lot, and this is another reason I thought I couldn't be a developer is because
Mhm.
I'm not really that kind of person. Like I I've always been more creative. I used to play music. I used to play in bands. I was never good at math. I was bad at
Yeah.
school. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like every like indicator in life was telling me
Yeah.
like
Right.
probably shouldn't become a programmer. But and like you, I'd kind of tried to learn a little bit on my own. Like I remember doing early Python courses, but it didn't quite make sense, and I wasn't getting enough feedback. And now I really have this perspective. Some people they'll do better starting on front end or back end, and I still think that's a personality thing. But either
Yeah.
way, you need to be given a curriculum or a learning path where you're
Yeah.
getting positive feedback consistently
Yeah.
enough. Um, like me and Keon from Stacker News were just talking about this yesterday. Like, you can only eat dirt for so long. You can only shoot off your hard work into the void for so long. It needs to be spaced in
Right.
such a way to where you're like at least every few days or every few weeks you're getting some kind of positive feedback, some kind of like, okay, I got past this. And what's great
Yeah.
about front end is that you're seeing it right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
So you can do a basic HTML lesson in 30 minutes and make a
Yeah.
little web page, and like that's positive
Yeah.
feedback, and then you can add some styles onto it.
Yeah.
And so that kind of step process, like after trying to learn on my own, that's what, when I started from just like HTML up, that's where I
Hmm.
got the most progress. So it's like, okay, this is what I'm excited to show people,
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
reason. And then just making it all about as much about Bitcoin or Lightning as you can. Because honestly, none
Yeah.
of that stuff really is about Bitcoin. It isn't.
Right. Right.
You have to frame it in such a way to where like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what we're building up into.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that is interesting. Another thing you said earlier about just like the opportunity in Lightning, like I see that as well, where we can make apps that move money now.
Hmm.
And micropayments, in fact, not just like moving money, like using Stripe's API,
Yeah.
but actually moving sats across the network on behalf of
Yeah.
users, or allowing users to do that however you build your app. And
Yeah.
that's something really powerful. And realizing for me, like kind of in the last year, going from like, okay, I'm a pretty good web developer, but I can't really do much with Lightning.
Yeah.
And then just like in the last 10 months, just getting exposure to all of these tools and seeing all of these different pathways to where if you're just a basic kind of web developer or junior developer, here's
Yeah.
all of these different things you can build today.
Yeah.
So that's just what's been so exciting for me.
Yeah.
How did you get started? Like, did you try and learn how to code on your own very much before the course? Like, why did the course stand out to you, I guess?
So, um, I guess I'll start by saying like what's interesting about the course in hindsight, and just like not even so much the course, but also just like front end stuff in general, is that it reminded me like, did you ever use MySpace as a kid?
No, that was like right. I was familiar with it, but I never had my own page. I was like right before my
Okay.
era.
That it like there was like a lot of HTML and CSS that you would do in MySpace to like make your profile page like kind of unique. You could like add this little like music player plugin, and you could have like these different kinds of like style, like literally cascading styles. Uh, and so that kind of like, I guess this is like a roundabout way of saying like, when I started doing the course, I started to like tap into that, and I was like, oh shit, like I've done like stuff like this before. But back to your actual question, when I was considering like learning to code, or like just taking the course, I was actually unemployed for like holiday season. Um, and it's a terrible time to like be looking for tech jobs. So
Hmm.
to anyone out there who's like looking for a job, like I feel you, bro. Like keep grinding, and I would say network is your best friend. Like meet people, talk to people. But I felt like I needed to add some sort of like tangible skill to my resume that sort of like differentiated me. And honestly, too, man, it just got to a point where I was just like bashing my head against the wall, like applying to jobs and stuff. And I was like, I need to do something that's like hard enough to like take my mind off of this this period of time. So I was like, I think Bitcoin is a very good prism to like open up to like whether it's like per se like coding, it like that's one way you could take it. It also like you can like understand, we were talking about at the beginning, like economics, you'd like work on understanding economics or work on understanding like what is the internet, or that kind of thing. But I just decided to take it in the realm of in coding. And I think PlebDev Volume 1 is at least it was the most accessible and like the most obvious choice for me. I followed Carr on Twitter. I'd seen other people like posting about it. I think you guys released it. When did you guys release it? November 22 or?
Yeah, November, December 22. I think like late November.
Yeah. I'd seen it talked about and I was like, that's interesting. But I was like employed at the time and I like thought I didn't have time. Then I became unemployed and I was like, well, fuck it. Like, let me try. Cause like, you know what it was too? It was like, the saying people have where they're like, you're like talking to them about Bitcoin and they're like, oh, I'm not technical. Like I'd gotten in the habit of saying that, but like I always kind of felt like wrong saying that because like in high school, like I was always taking like advanced math classes, like advanced science classes. I like got a minor in math in college and majored in Keynesian economics, which how that goes. But like at the
Well,
same
it's
time, like I was
interesting.
doing math my whole life. Like it was like, and when I was like, oh, I'm not technical, I'm like, but you are. And I was like, why don't you just try it? So I like that was pretty much like my reasoning, I guess, as to why I decided to take the course. And I felt like if it was associated with the Bitcoin Citadel city of Austin, Texas, like it probably would have been a decent product. And it was on Oshi. I love Mike Atwood. I'm always down to support Oshi. So I was like, let's
Oh yeah.
let's run it. I had some sats like sitting in my Oshi like rewards account anyways. I was like, perfect. Like paid for it with Oshi and went from there.
Dang, that's legendary. Um, for sure. And like, gosh, I've heard definitely a few similar stories, and I just relate to your story as well. Like, I didn't have that exact like one. I mean, I guess kind of my boot camp was like that one opportunity to like really
Yeah.
jump into something. But even then, breaking into the Bitcoin world was like, I had
Oh
no
yeah.
idea how it happened. I had no idea how I'd meet people. And I didn't meet anyone in Bitcoin until I got to Austin about 10 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in Bitcoin alone for 5 years essentially,
Sure.
and I think that's actually like the standard experience for
Yeah.
people.
I
It's
think
like
so too.
most of those random Bitcoin plebs we see online, like that's all they have
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Um, and I love how you mentioned about like being technical. Like
Yeah.
this goes right back to like this air in the room about Bitcoin, and the feeling that it gives people is that this is intimidating. It's intimidating technology, but um, Bitcoin plebs actually are technical,
Yeah.
and this is something I realize. Like I've thought so much about the specifically the Bitcoin plebs,
Mhm.
and it's a great audience to like teach to, I guess,
Yeah.
to be a
No,
teacher for, because Bitcoin plebs, they already understand. Well, for one, they understand the value proposition of Bitcoin, and so they've
right.
worked through a lot of bullshit doing that. But as a Bitcoin pleb, you're also exposed to these really sophisticated computer science concepts of public-private key cryptography,
Yeah.
hashing, and like all these different things that Bitcoin touches,
Yeah.
networks, how networks work, the client server model, really.
Yeah.
Like we get exposed to that at a very low level when we think
Yeah.
about running our own node. Are we doxing
Exactly.
our xpub to some server? Like all of these things that Bitcoin plebs are thinking about. It's like, listen, if you just added a few hard skills along
Yeah.
with these lessons you've learned, like you would become really dangerous pretty
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
Um, and you just need someone to tell you that like you can do it. There's no reason why you can't. Yeah. And so yeah, I mean that's basically for me why I like the audience of PlebDev specifically.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Totally.
but I'm trying to think. Circling back, you said you got a degree in economics, Keynesian
Yeah.
specifically.
Well,
That's
I mean,
interesting. Or that's just what they teach.
yeah, that's just what they teach.
Yeah.
Like it's the classic, like you take a money and banking class and they're like, oh no, inflation is actually necessary for like the economy to grow forever kind of thing. And then,
Hmm.
like I don't know how you were at college, but I was like half drunk like the entire time. So when they're like, yeah, we need inflation to grow forever, I'm like, I don't know, but like whatever. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I
you
mean?
must understand something I don't.
I'm here to take the test and get the grade and like whatever. At a certain point, like I'm here to get the piece of paper that lets me get a job or whatever the fuck. So, um, but yeah, I mean, Bitcoin can open your mind to like maybe I was wrong about like certain things, or maybe I don't actually understand things as much as I want or as much as I think I do. From the perspective of economics, but also from the perspective of computer science. I mean, I didn't have any uh, formal or even like prior computer science training, or really even like good understanding of literally what the internet was, or what the internet is, what a browser is and does. Like that was amazing to like kind of like understand through first the PlebDev course, and then following the PlebDev course, I did some other like courses on Udemy,
Yeah.
just because I like you were saying, like there's a bunch of free resources on YouTube for any would-be pleb devs out there. Like there's free stuff on YouTube. Like go check that out too. Whatever language you're interested in, it's there. But for me, I felt like I want to pay a little bit of money so that I feel like that I have skin in the game. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
a little bit of skin in the game. And then, I mean, it's like, listen, like $12 for like a 25-hour course. Like it's good stuff. Like I think it's worth it. Um, but yeah, just like going through and doing like mostly, mostly like JavaScript based stuff. So I did like a React course. I did um, like a basic JavaScript course. I did a little bit of TypeScript, and
Nice.
then following that, like, and at this point now, what I'm really doing to like advance my knowledge is just trying to work on projects when I have time. Whether that's, I mean, at this point too, it's still mostly like tutorials. Like I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I'm gonna sit down and like build this grand app or whatever, but like I just try to learn through osmosis, like
Yeah.
do things and do things that are interesting, but that I think will be valuable. And like for me, for myself, like what I do is I write about Bitcoin, right? And so I thought one of the most obvious like examples of like a project that I could do is like make a blog. So that was
Hmm.
one thing I tinkered around. I think like if you go to my GitHub, there's like 5 different like shitty like half done blogs, and then
Nice.
one that's done. You know what I mean? Like one that is actually a blog and functional and all these kinds of things. But it took me a while to like figure out different aspects of a blog, like different features I thought I wanted that turned out to be a lot harder or unnecessary, or like, like I don't know. It can get demoralizing, especially when you're like you were saying, like eating dirt for so long. But like you said as well too about front end, like a blog is relatively simple, right? It's like, especially if it's a static blog, it's like, you know, render page, show text, have a
Hmm.
button if there's a button, like, and that's about it. So it's like doing projects that make sense for you, but also I think being mindful not to bite off too much. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Unless you're pretty confident that you have some good guardrails, uh like the pleb dev course for that like wallet, the pleb wallet, like it's nice to have had guardrails, because that one, I mean, I did fuck it up the first time I did it. Like it
Hmm.
like did not work well. I had to like go back and like redo the whole thing. Um, but I think that's all just a part of the journey. At a certain point.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard project. Like uh we level up really fast in the pleb dev course,
Mhm.
and I wondered how people would deal with it. And another thing, like you mentioned, taking like these other courses and just using other resources after the fact, which is great. Like that was my intention, or I was kind of, when we were planning the course, I was like, okay, we only have so much time, we only have so much resources. So what are we going to cover? And so I had thought a lot about who is this for? How can I help them succeed. Like, what do we need? And originally, like, my idea was way too bloated. It was essentially a full boot camp. I wanted to reteach my entire boot camp and show you everything about JavaScript and then show you everything
Yeah.
about React. And I realized that, like, well, if we can get them building a project each lesson, and then we show them the 20% that gets them the 80%,
Hmm.
then if you're really going to make it, then you'll take advantage of the resources,
Right.
because you're gonna have to do that either way.
Yeah.
Like, I can't like make something that will perfectly like handhold you to the end and then you'll be good.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do stuff on your own either way. And so after I embraced that, I realized, like, actually this should be a lot more compact. This should be a lot more opinionated, but be structured in such a way to where, like, if you really want to finish, there's no reason why you can't finish the project.
Yeah.
Like, you can go to the GitHub link and copy each file if you want over in your own local, code editor, and then go tear it apart and go see what you didn't understand before. Like,
Right.
whatever you need to do, you can do it, or just reach out and bug me. Like,
Yeah.
my goal with PlebDevs is to get to the point to where I can't manage the inbound anymore of people
Yeah.
asking me
Right.
for help, and I'm far from that. So, like, my
Right.
work is far from over. Like, I have a whole ton of promotion and new things to do still before
Right.
that happens. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's the project is hard, I guess. Like, it's definitely it's a few big steps up. Um, and it's almost like, maybe, like you said, you had to redo it. Maybe it is the kind of thing where you'd want to go through it a second time, or go through a few of the lessons a second time.
I would, yeah, for sure. Like, sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah.
definitely, like, but I will say about it in terms of, like, by shooting high, like, by like aiming for like a functional, like, LN bits, like, kind of front end, which is sick, by the way. Like, it's a very interesting thing to like introduce people to, from the perspective, like, I hadn't used LN bits at all until that project, and I was like, oh my god, you can. I was just like getting to thinking, like, while doing the problem, like, what else can you do with this? Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
But anyways, like, when you figure out, like, or when the pleb wallet is done, and when you start moving, I think after you move on to other things, and you realize, like, okay, obviously I had guardrails. Obviously, you have the course that kind of like keeps you on the straight and narrow and gets you to the completed wallet project. But it is like a complicated, somewhat complicated thing where it's like you're making API calls. Like, that's not like that's not a blog, I guess. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's different. But it gives you like a sense of confidence. Like, I didn't leave the course thinking like I'm a fucking dev, like, I still like call myself a dev larper, but
Mhm.
like, it was inspiring to know, like, okay, like, this is possible and accessible. It's just about, like, for me now, it's like trying to piece things together in terms of like concrete, like, structures in applications. So like one thing that I'm focusing on right now is, like, just for blogs in general, is like search bars. And
Mhm.
as before my coding experience, I was like, oh yeah, you just throw a search bar in there and it's like easy or whatever. And it's like, now I'm like looking at it, I'm like, that is such a goddamn hard problem, especially if you have a lot of things to search from. It's like, how do you organize it? How do you like keep the data somewhere? What are you calling with? Like, there's like all these things to consider. But it's at once intimidating, but also inspiring to be like, okay, if I just break these things down into little pieces, these components, or you think components or problems or whatever, but it's like breaking it down into the little pieces and then attacking it one by one. Like, that's I think like something that I've taken away from the pleb dev course, and then just like doing other stuff on the front end in general,
Mhm.
is just like not getting too intimidated by like the bigness of a project, or in just like kind of attacking it one by one, just in small pieces, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that echoes back to what you were saying before about, like, when you were building your blog, like, you have three broken, shitty blog
Oh
repos
yeah.
on your GitHub,
Oh yeah.
But like I love that you did that because for me, like early on, since I was just mostly alone
Hmm.
and just kind of like, okay, this is like a marathon, you know, a
Yeah.
triathlon I'm going to run alone over the next few years. You can't, like, if you're working on some little problem like a search bar or like a few months back, I spent probably like 4 days like working on a markdown editor,
Oh
like a
yeah.
form where you could like, yeah, like basically like type in just a form that would turn into markdown and could
Yeah.
show like code blocks.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
spent like 4 days on this thing, and I'm just pushing like just like a dozen commits on this one
Yeah.
little component that's
Yeah.
still broken. And like I'll happily do that to this day because
Yeah.
I just learned to like lean into the green squares, lean into the
Yeah.
commits on GitHub and realize that like, okay, even if I didn't get this today, like this is my proof of work. Like
Yes. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
bar isn't being a great dev. My bar is like showing up and just like pushing code every day or every day
Yeah.
that I can.
Yeah.
And that's like a powerful like framing and mindset shift. And so I definitely wanted to like emphasize that in the course when we were talking about GitHub. And it's why I wanted to get people set up on GitHub.
Yeah.
Um, and Super didn't understand this. Super, he's built different. He was like,
Yeah.
he doesn't. I mean, he uses GitHub, but like a lot of what he does is very. He's just built different. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I had to
I
like pitch him on a lot of this stuff. Like, yeah, like people, this is gonna mean a lot to people if they can get started pushing code. Um, so I mean, it's cool, but yeah, like that's all you can do sometimes is just like push the code and try. And in fact, I just finished like um, the last 3 or 4 days this week. I'm working on a project for the Bitcoin plus plus workshop I'm going to do in a few weeks,
nice.
and I was trying to get this simple LNURL authentication flow working
Mm.
inside of a Next.js app,
Hmm.
and I just spent like 4 days like working on it, just like
Yeah.
on the verge of tears and
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
getting help from people around the office and I finally got it like working last night, and I just like shut my laptop,
Yeah.
went home
That's
and drank, and
yeah.
and it was just like, man, this is what it's about. Like
Yeah.
you kind of got to be comfortable with that
Yeah.
and just learn how to, I don't know, be cold in the face of
Yeah.
that and not get too emotional, not get too caught up in it, and realize that like this is a part of the proof of work. Like
Yeah.
it's on the other side of that 4 days. Like now I'm ready to teach a workshop on LNURL auth. I
Yeah.
can
Right.
workflow it all out and show you everything.
We already
Um,
made all the mistakes, right? Or not all
exactly.
of them, but you already like, yeah, exactly. And so when people come to you with like whether it's the same frustration or just like frustrations in the same vein, you can take the perspective of like, oh yeah, yeah, I understand. Like, don't worry about it. Like, just keep trying, and maybe you should consider this, this perspective or whatever. But uh, not similarly, probably. But I was like for my job, we work in we work with Hugo, which is the static site generator,
Yeah. Okay.
and like I'm trying to upload this blog or this article that I wrote on Bitcoin addresses, and it has this like table in it, and I don't know if you've ever worked with tables in Markdown, but I spent like
Mm.
2.5 hours on like the back end of my Friday afternoon, and I thought I was gonna fucking like just upload this thing. Like I'd already written it, and I had already like taken like a bunch of different like short code things and done that, but I hadn't touched the table or whatever. And I was like, it'll be fine. Like I'm sure there's something on the internet. Like it'll be whatever. And man, like I had my fiance was like sitting out like in our living room too, and she was just like, yeah, I was just like watching TikToks while you were just having like a small mental breakdown or whatever. Like just I was like fuck, I can't get this table like you know what I mean, just like look like shit. I tried to like do some links inside the table, and it was just like the actual link in the table. I'm like, god damn it, like because I wanted to be like, hey, yeah, this is like the first article that I'm like my first new article for River, like this is what I made or whatever, and like because there is the element like you were saying of like eating a lot of dirt, and it's like fine, I'll eat the dirt, but I also want my flowers too, right? Like I want
Hmm.
I want to be able to show like, hey, this is what I've been working on. And it was just frustrating to like have everything done with this goddamn table. And like, but at the same time, it's like, took a step back after that and went over to some of our mutual friends' houses last night and had some beers too. And I was just like, still a good day, man. Like, it's a good day to
Hmm.
be like, it's a good day to be like grinding in that sense where it's like, I never thought that. And I like, again, this is like markdown. So I'm not like coding, like making like a whatever, but uh,
I mean,
it's
you're
nice.
you're integrating it into a web app, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to, it's just nice to feel like I'm on the path there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
I if I could talk to like younger me, like I wish I could tell him like you're capable of so much. You know what I mean? Not to get like super whatever, but like I wish I could tell my younger self like, man, like you can do whatever you want. Just put in the time, like focus and strive earnestly toward your goals, and you can accomplish a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the Bitcoiner way. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's what inspired me and continues to inspire me the most. Like,
Mhm.
I almost I almost don't even like to talk about Bitcoin that much anymore.
I
Or as far as like these things that I've talked about 100 times and I just know
Yeah.
they're just solidified. I don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
But I still love talking to people and like hearing what their Bitcoin journey was,
Yeah.
hearing how they've grown. Because for me, like how my life transformed was incredible. Like I couldn't believe it, and I still can't believe it. And the whole time as it was happening, I was having this thought like, if this is happening for me, like I
Right.
know I'm not special. And I
Right.
know
Right.
that I had a ton of resistance
Yeah.
for, I was an adult child before I found Bitcoin.
I feel you.
And it's like, if this is happening for me, this must be happening for like other people like me all around the world right now at the same time.
Yeah.
And this was years back, and I wasn't really able to kind of see tangible evidence of it, but I knew it was happening. And now in Austin, I'm in through PlebDevs. I'm running into
Yeah.
these people in real life that were
Yeah.
like, yeah, I went through the same thing, 5 years or
Yeah.
3 years, or and I mean it's super inspiring, and it shows that there's something real there. Um, and like for me, it was like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
I love giving this analogy. Like when I really got Bitcoin, like 4 years ago, like really, really got it, and I knew that I was going to hold my Bitcoin. I knew that uh, as far as money and retirement and my savings in the future went, like I was secure, I was sound. Like it took me from someone who was in like the bottom two rungs of the Maslow's hierarchy and it just
Yeah.
skipped me right to the top, which the
Right.
top is self-actualization.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, and for those that don't know, like it's like a psychological kind of analogy
It's
of
different.
this pyramid of different levels of human needs, where at the bottom is just like food and water, and then there's shelter, and there's like friends and loved ones, and all this, and at the top is self-actualization, which is this
Yeah.
weird, ambiguous thing. But this is what Bitcoin allows you to do. It's like jump right to what is my mission, what is my purpose in life. Um, and yeah, I mean, I would love to hear like a bit about your just general Bitcoin
Yeah.
story, because you got in Bitcoin despite being educated in economics,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
seems like a hard
So
path.
yeah. Oh man, so many things to say. I would. Where do I start? Um. So I think that my Bitcoin journey, I think, technically started in high school or like early college when my friends and I used Bitcoin to gamble offshore and lose all our money, gambling
Nice.
on like offshore sports bets or sports books. Um, but we didn't ever. I mean, I get me. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Classic like Bitcoin journeyers, like it comes into your purview, and then you dismiss it, and then much later it comes and finds you again. But I didn't get back into it until honestly the end of 2021, the beginning of 2022 was when I like fully, not fully, but when I actually started to get an inkling of what it was. So realistically, like I've been in this space for, I would say about a year, just over a year,
Hmm.
um, which I think is, uh, it made me like self-conscious because I like to think about myself as like somewhat of a smart person, but it's like, how smart are you if you didn't see this thing for so long? Which is always like, there's always that thought in the back of my mind, which is like the imposter syndrome thing. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's like when it dawned on me like what Bitcoin was, like I was like, yeah, sure, I didn't get in like 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, but I was like, this is the thing. Like, at least in my mind, for millennials and Zoomers, this is like the shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and regardless of when you get in or whatever, like, in to me, in my opinion, this is our shot. This is our shot to not get fucking rolled again and again and again. This is it. And I was like, whatever, man, all in. At the time when I figured it out, January 2022, all in. I was lucky enough to get this opportunity to write for a South Korean startup last year, for the majority of last year. And I was working, they did a little bit of shit coining as well, but I was fortunate enough to like, even like a couple months into my Bitcoin journey, like people in crypto land, they just like think Bitcoin is like the, the old technology or like the outdated thing or whatever. So I had the opportunity to basically like own this content repository about Bitcoin. So I just used that as like teaching myself. Like, I was producing content, but I was also learning.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I just used my learning experience to create content. And that's still honestly what I do going forward. But
That's like
I,
exactly what I'm doing in PlebDevs. Like
yeah,
every single workshop and live hack I'm doing, basically every single one is like the week before I did it. I
yes,
was doing it for the first time, right? And learning, and it's like,
yes.
oh, cool, I can do this. Cool. So let's now simplify it and see how I can like,
Literally,
structure it.
after we get off this call, I'm gonna do the one I think you did last week, the one with the channel, like I think you made it in Vite,
Oh yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Yeah, kind of the node dashboard.
Yeah, I just like, I saw that and I was like, ooh, that looks fun. And I was planning on I was planning on doing it yesterday because I thought I was gonna have some time.
Oh yeah.
Get wrecked. But yeah, like, yeah. Anyways, what was I gonna say? Yeah, just that's the way I see how I write about Bitcoin now and going forward, is like, I like technical concepts and stuff like that, learning about them for myself, but I think the best the best way that I can like kind of grow as like a content creator or educator or Bitcoiner in general is to take things that were confusing or complicated to me and then translate them into uh, like digestible forms of information for anyone. Like, not someone who's uh, you know got a mind for like economics or even a mind for computer science. Just like anyone off the street. If I can explain Bitcoin related concepts to you and you don't give a shit about Bitcoin, then one, like, the content is better, but two, that means I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
it's, if you can teach something, that means you know it.
That's what Feynman said. Um,
Right.
I forget the exact quote, but it's like if you really understand something, you should be able to explain it to a 5-year-old.
Right. Exactly.
Like that shows the most sophisticated kind of understanding when you can
Right.
just boil it down to its most fundamental units without bastardizing it or compromising
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
underlying concept.
Yeah. And like, I mean, that's in Bitcoin, like that. I mean, in Bitcoin, like the theoretical concepts, but also in like in coding, and whether it's, front end or back end or whatever, it's like that shit is hard. That is a hard thing to do in terms of like the challenge of it. Like, I'm sure you could talk to, someone. I'm sure you would have a much easier time explaining the concepts you go through in the pleb dev course to someone who has like coding experience already.
Hmm.
The challenge is like, how do you 0 to 1 someone and getting them excited about like learning more, like that. I
Hmm.
think that I see as like a real challenge. And again, like, I appreciate you having me on here and stuff, and I would tell you if the course sucked, but it didn't. Like, it's a good course. Like, you did a good job. You guys all did a good job with
Thanks.
it. And yeah, I mean, I know you're working on more stuff there too. And man, I'm super grateful for just the PlebDev like YouTube feed, because like there's at least 5 or 6 live hacks on there that like I have like a little to-do list of. I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. Like Paul did one with like a I think there's like a Rust something or other on there. I'm like, ooh, that looks interesting.
Hold up on that.
Yeah,
No, I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
kidding.
But you know what I mean? Like
That
there's
yeah, actually, like this is kind of the next journey I want to make eventually. After I'm working on the back end course right now,
yeah,
and man, it is a beast. But
yeah,
after that, like for me, my continued coding journey is leading in the direction of Rust or
yeah,
Go or something lower level like that. Most likely Rust,
yeah.
because I want to be able to work with LDK. But
Dude.
yeah, I mean that's the next level, and those are the guys I see around here that like
Mm-hmm.
you talk about imposter syndrome. Like I'm looking up to
Oh,
them, and I'm like, wow,
yeah,
how do you get there?
yeah,
So there's levels, but it's cool just to be able to be participate and be a part of it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
something that I said early on, or something that I just realized, and I tweeted this out, was like, yeah, like Bitcoin needs a lot of 10x developers, and we love our 10x developers, but Bitcoin also needs thousands of 1x developers, millions of 1x developers. And like my dream is just to be a 1x Bitcoin developer,
Yeah.
just to be able to hold up my end.
Yeah.
And I think that's how a lot of the plebs feel like. And this is once again why I think that this group of people, this audience, is super undervalued and super
Mhm.
underutilized, is because you've got all of these principled Bitcoin plebs that
Mhm.
are mostly on the sidelines, and they need
Right.
to be
Right.
called
Right.
into action. Maybe it's not coding for a lot of people. It's not going to be coding, but we want as many people active and building and as possible. And so we kind of have to like call them forward and be like, hey,
Yeah.
you're welcome, come along.
Mhm.
That's what people did for me. And so like that's my impetus is I almost have survivor's guilt because it's like I'm not special, like I shouldn't have
Right.
been able to make it myself. So therefore I want to help as many other people to like make up for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's very interesting about like the 10x developer versus a 1x developer. I think my grandest my grandest dream with coding is, and I've said this, like I always say this, like my dream is to be a serviceable like developer,
Hmm.
serviceable, not the best in the fucking world. I just want to be able to like solve a problem, in the context of what I know right now, like solve some sort of front end problem, help out and pitch in. I want to be able to like deliver a piece of, a component or something to an engineer as like, here's your scaffolding, build some other cool shit on top of this, but here's like a baseline. And that's for me, like I would love that. You know what I mean? Like to be decent enough to like troubleshoot my own computer issues in the command line like consistently.
Hmm.
And that's about like for me right now. But yeah, I really think like it's just, I mean, it's given me like just kind of like trying to go down this path has given me an understanding and like an appreciation for like, I think open source developers broadly speaking, just because I'm like, holy shit, and you do this like full time and you don't get paid. And like in Bitcoin, like you have this perception of like, oh, it's the fucking devs or whatever. And it's just like, like hats off to you if you're out there, if you're an open source Bitcoin developer and you feel like you're not getting any recognition, like hit me up on Twitter, bro. I'll tell you how great you are. Like I appreciate you for real. I the space, that's the cool part about this space is there's so many opportunities to contribute. And like you're saying, it's not going to be coding for everyone. Like for me, as far as my Bitcoin journey too, I didn't mention this, but my first way of like contributing, I felt, was to get involved with the Beef Initiative because I had some
Hmm.
past experience with like nutrition and kind of at least understanding for me what works for nutrition. And that, surprise, surprise, it's eating a lot of animal products. And I was like, okay, cool. There's this crossover between like meat and Bitcoin. Like, I think I can get involved there. And I saw it as a way to like proliferate adoption in the sense of like farmers and ranchers are like, they seem like great candidates to like use Bitcoin. Like it's a very easy sell. At like when you get down to it, it's like, I don't think it's a good idea to go up to them and be like, hey, have you considered Bitcoin? But you know, when you get them talking about like, man, it sucks that you have to pay 3 to 5% for these goddamn credit card like transactions. You have to get like a terminal, like a POS. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you could just like have this little app on your phone that like you could just get money like zapped into your you know your possession, and you know, so it's like stuff like that. But that was like my kind of my first contribution, I guess, and that really helped me see that there was more. Like the Beef Initiative was a wonderful way for me to like get an understanding that I could contribute, and it allowed me like the vantage point to see out like, holy shit, there's so many other things that like you can do. Like you don't have to code, I guess is my point of saying all this. You don't have to code. You can, like I started with Beef Initiative like just writing articles, and now like, you know, credit to Slim and the team that they have there, but like, you know, they let me like reach out to like ranchers and be like, hey, have you heard of Beef Initiative? Like, you know, I guess the point is like, you can do whatever you want. Like, don't ask for permission. Just like start doing stuff. If you feel passionately about something in Bitcoin, especially, like people are very open to the proof of work, right? Like demonstrating that you give a shit. That's what it comes down to for me. Yeah.
No, and I love your story is a good, I think it's a good example to set, because it's so early right now. Unless you're the cream of the crop, if you're the cream of the crop, then Bitcoin will reach out to you and they'll try and get you. But outside of that, we're so early that like you just have to be super high agency to get in.
Yeah.
And I think about this a lot because my wife, she's like a writer and a poet, more of a creative, and she's into Bitcoin, and she's done a number of things, writing and crafts and all this kind of cool stuff around Bitcoin, but she always kind of comes back to just being uncertain about what her place is and like that she can add value. And I think that a lot of people are still in that space where like we're so early that unless you're like an economist or a coder or a fucking podcaster, I guess, then like there's not a super obvious position for you to take in this movement. But it's all temporary. I think that soon we're going to be recruiting people en masse. You know, next bull market maybe, but like, yeah, and what held me back for so long, like I love, you were saying earlier that you're almost ashamed that like it took you so long to really solidify your belief in Bitcoin. But for me, I hear that and I'm like, that's legendary. Like you got it a year ago or something like that is what you said. And you just jumped right in. Like for a lot of us, like for me, it took years for those ideas to percolate and for me to go out and start talking about it. And really I was afraid and ashamed for so long to kind of go public and start talking about myself and talking about my story. And it wasn't until a little over a year ago now, I thought of Bitcoin PlebDev. And I thought of this framing to talk about myself through that I felt comfortable with. Because I wanted to talk about being a developer in Bitcoin, but I wasn't a Bitcoin developer. I was just like a shitty web dev. And so I was like, what's my framing? Like, how do I, what's my place? And so I kind of had to author my own framing, like kind of author my own place in the Bitcoin space. And then when I started to broadcast out that signal, the world reflected that image back at me, and it's just like, now it's a thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's how early we are. Like you're still kind of authoring your own path. And so for you saw this connection with something that you knew, you had an interest, I guess, health and Beef Initiative, and then a skill, writing. And really that's all it takes right there is like those two things. And then you have to reach out.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, a lot of the plebs, they're still in that skill development area. They maybe can't even write. And like, that's how I was before. Like I tried to write, I tried to podcast. I had an eBay store. Like I tried to do all this stuff to like find some vertical some way in, and it wasn't really until I uh, just strapped down and started getting to work and built a real
Yeah.
skill set
Yeah.
till
Yeah.
the time it happened.
Do you want to talk about uh like how to, I don't know, how to exactly frame this, like get into the space, or like how to get more involved?
Definitely, yeah.
Um I'll just share. So I guess like I have many people to thank and a lot of people to like organizations to give credit for. Obviously, like the Beef Initiative, like shout out to JP and Slim. I really appreciate the, like basically I started, how I got involved with the Beef Initiative is I was just going to like I was just going to farmers markets in Chicago, and I was just like just talking to vendors, and I would like tweet about it, and I would like send pictures of like my market haul on Saturday or Sundays, and I would like tag the Beef Initiative in Texas Slim, and he just DM'd me one time, and he was just like, "Let's jump on a call, man. Like, let's talk. Like, let's get you involved." And I was like, "Oh, cool, awesome," and then went from there. But also, massive shout out to the people who put on Chicago PlebDevs. Hell of a meetup. That I would say is like, if I could recommend like one thing for anyone who wants to get more involved in Bitcoin, go to meetups. Like spend the money, spend the time, whatever you have to do, get to the meetups, meet the other plebs, talk to them. Like guarantee you there are other people who have felt like you if you're, you know, hesitant to get in or whatever. You don't even have to be public facing, man. Like you can spin up another nim, like, you know, do another, you know, do something out, like, but absolutely meet people in real life. I think that, like you were saying, moving to Austin is huge. Like, thankfully being in Chicago, like there is a Bitcoin community here. But I mean, even for me, I like, you know, I expanded my like knowledge and just I expanded like just the bullishness of my perspective in Bitcoiners, like going down like Bitcoin Park in Nashville. And I still haven't even been to Austin, like to the Bitcoin, like the, you know, like Bitcoin Commons or Pleb Lab. Like, man, like I already know when I come down to like Austin, like I'm going to explode. Like it's just going to be so fucking awesome. Like like meeting plebs and like Bitcoiners want to help Bitcoiners, I guess is the point. It's like,
Yeah.
let them help you. Like build with each other, level up together, right? Like that I think is like a super underrated thing. People always talk about like go network, whatever. This is not bullshit business networking. This is like plebs helping plebs. That's the
Yeah, and that's the feeling here on the ground in Austin. I feel like, I mean, like I said earlier, I didn't really get to network with Bitcoiners in person until I got down here, and it's very much like the feeling I get at these meetups is like, you know, the like we're gonna stick it out with each other. Like
yeah.
we kind of all know that things can get really bad here, but we're a community that will actually help each other and actually is like capable of doing that and capable of changing things, at least at our community level, first and
Yeah,
foremost.
exactly.
And so that's really important and it's really inspiring. And it's like, yeah, if you can get to that physical location where other Bitcoiners are, do whatever you can to get there. If you can't, then find a way that you can get involved more deeply on the online networks.
Yeah.
You know, something like PlebDevs. Like if you come around and you ask me for help every day and you're actually doing work, I'll message you every day. I'll literally, you know, like I'll do whatever I can to like get you to that next level or connect you with people.
Dude, yeah.
And there's lots of other people like me that if you come across their path and you show them that you're genuine, they will do the same.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened for me. Like showing up here at Pleb Lab, I was just following these people online. Like I had wanted to come to Austin for years and was trying to arrange my life to be able to come here. And about a year and a half ago, I started seeing Austin Bitcoin Club and Pleb Lab on Twitter. And I was like, this is exactly where I want to be. This is exactly the kind of people. And, you know, I tried to interact with them a little bit on Twitter and let them know, like, I'm going to make it down to Austin one day. And when I finally got here, I expected that there would be 10 other guys like me who are
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
devs, and they're trying to get on the inner circle and they're
yeah.
trying to get people's attention and all of that. But there wasn't. It was just me. Like I showed up and
Yeah,
there was the ride or dies, like literally a room full of legends and then
yep,
no one else.
yep,
And then I just showed up and I was like, hey, I'm here to learn. Like,
yep.
I'm here to help out, do whatever I can,
Yep.
and was fully embraced. And so
That's
we're still in that phase now. Like if it's Chicago or New York or Nashville, Austin, wherever you can
wherever.
get, like you'll find that.
That's been my experience too. Like at every the kind of Bitcoin focused thing is like if you're earnest, and you're putting in the work and you're not a shithead, like I mean, people respond. Like people respond positively to that, and like like we said, it's just like shit can go wrong, but Bitcoin for me has just been such like a white pilling experience in the sense of like okay, there's actually something we can do, like instead of like bitching and complaining all day every day about like, oh, they printed this much more money, oh, we're doing this, that, or the other thing like overseas. It's like, dude, fuck it. Like we have steps we can take right now. I can go like bash my head into a wall on this like markdown table for 4 hours, but at least I'm getting better at something, right? Like at least I'm like at least I'm getting better at growing in a skill set that I can contribute back to like a real, a real kind of movement. Because at the end of the day, like that's what this is. And yeah, I would, yeah, co-sign what you said too. Like if you can't get to a physical location for whatever reason, reach out to people online, like try to contribute in other ways. Like there's always room for everyone, man. Like especially like you're saying, like we're still so goddamn early. Like we need more people. We need more people with every kind of skill set. And I think is a terrible time to like be looking for jobs. So again, if you're out there and you're looking for jobs, like keep grinding, like reach out to people in that sense too. Like, but we need more people, like more people with diverse skill sets and more more 1x devs. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
seriously, like whatever you can do, whatever you can contribute, I think is super valuable.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, and I mean, I guess I get a decent amount of questions about getting your first Bitcoin job and
Yeah,
even just getting your first tech job or like programming
sure.
job, something like that. And it's definitely like you said, it's a tough market right now.
Hmm.
But for those, like my perspective is for those who are like going through this bear market and they're actually building, they're actually putting in the proof of work every day and they're focused. I feel like it's inevitable. Like
Yeah, I agree.
whether it's the Bitcoin job or it's like that you're imagining, or maybe it's some other form that you can't even imagine right now, like that path you're on, as you put in that proof of work, you're kind of just making it inevitable at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Um, and I felt that in my journey too. Like after a certain amount of time, you're just digging into this hole. Like I was just digging into this Bitcoin thing for 4 years, changed my
mhm,
whole life for it. And I was just like, it's inevitable. Something's going to happen at this point. Like you're just
yeah,
building up all this potentiality. Um, and yeah, I mean the bear market legends right now are the ones that are going to be the first hires once the bull
yeah,
market comes around and those positions start opening up.
yeah.
Um, Man, we've got people are feeling this conversation in the comments
Hell
on,
yeah,
on Twitch right now. We've got some
hell yeah.
Feynman quotes. Um, our guy Dilfer saying it's tough balance building the skills for dev and BTC.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I definitely agree.
Yep,
It's it's kind of like you only have so much time,
yep,
right? So you're always making trade-offs. And like
yep,
I thought that when I was going through my Bitcoin journey, I thought that I could still do the music and band thing I was doing. I thought I could still do this thing and this thing, and slowly like those things they just had to get pushed to the side more and more as I focused. And so there always has to be sacrifice, but I think for those that are at least consistent, Like you can push a few lines of code every day. If you actually do that every day, and you're not just pushing garbage, you're like working on something, you're trying to learn something. If you actually do that every day or almost every day, like, on the other side of the bear market, you'll be pretty dangerous and a lot
And
further along than you think.
I think it's probably worth me saying too is like I didn't like I'm working for River now. I didn't get hired as a developer or even as a junior developer. Like
Hmm.
I got hired as a content marketer, uh, primarily to work on River Learn, which is like our like educational, content repository. Like I basically just pitched like I'll I'll also like try to tinker around on that Hugo code base. And I pitched it as like, I know that like River doesn't make money by having this blog. Like developer resources go to where companies make money. As like
Hmm.
someone who's worked in software before, I know that very well. Like if it doesn't make money, like devs aren't going to work on it from the perspective